Welcome to the weekly webinar here at Route Consultant. My name is Josh Gregory. I am the Vice President of Education here. All that means is that I work with both new buyers who are getting into the space for the first time to help understand the space, but also with contractors and FedEx, Amazon across the board to help find efficiencies in their business and any other ways that we can add profitability to help make you more successful. For everybody who's here every week, welcome back. And regardless of if this is your first week or if you're here every week, we still want this to be a place where everybody can come, learn, ask questions, and make sure that we're all finding ways to grow together. So just before I go too far into it, I do have to read a quick disclaimer as I do every week. Route Consultant is not endorsed by and is not recommended by Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. Route Consultant is not sponsored by, is not approved by, is not associated with, and has no connection whatsoever with Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. So for anyone who's never been here, just a quick overview of kind of the way these webinars will work. We'll go over some content, some things that I want to make sure everybody knows this week. And then I will go over some upcoming listings and events that are coming up. After that, it'll be a pure open Q&A. So whether you have questions about anything that I talk about today or anything at the space as a whole, I'll be here to answer as many questions as I can in the time we've got. Importantly, though, if you do have those questions, make sure that you put them in the Q&A button at the bottom of the window. There's a chat button, and if you put it in there, I'm going to miss it. So if you want your question answered, put it in the Q&A button at the bottom. So other than that, I will go ahead and get started. Now, I'm going to start with a little background. Before I get to the focus for what I want to talk about today, I just want to quickly remind everyone on what the Metals program is with FedEx. Some of you may have never heard of it, or some of you are intimately familiar with it, but just to make sure that we're all on the same page. And also, this is only for the P&D space right now, but all of you line haul contractors should be paying attention because it is coming to you all very soon. And if you haven't seen anything about that, you're probably going to hear more about it next month as you start to get into business review sessions. But those are coming for line haul as well. So the way the Metals program works, when it rolled out, a little over a year ago, so there are basically three categories that FedEx divides all contractors into. It is bronze, silver, and gold. And this is not something where you're bronze third place, so you're still doing well, you're still on the podium. Bronze is bad. So silver's average, gold is great. And that's kind of the way the tiers work. Third place is not third place, it's last. So that's really how bronze is. But just so you understand each tier. So gold is going to be a really small minority of contractors that are performing extremely well, hitting all of FedEx's standards. Now, the trick here for gold is that for many contractors, actually hitting those perfect standards that FedEx has laid out is often going to mean that you're sacrificing margins or you're running really, really lean, which can sometimes lead to safety challenges as well. So it's not always going to be your best operational strategy to be gold. Now, there are advantages of being gold. FedEx says that you may be considered for more growth, more contingency opportunities, but that's kind of a fuzzy benefit. We don't know, they haven't been super explicit about defining that or exactly what that promise is. So in theory, gold contractors are better. They have more perks, but it's going to be a case-by-case basis how much that really benefits you. Now, most people are going to be in the silver category. And for most, it's really going to be where you aim to stay. It's where you're going to be most of the time. You could be headed towards gold, but like I said, it's often not always something that is possible to be achieved in your territory or is extremely difficult to do. And it's even more difficult to stay in gold once you've gotten there. And there's no real negative or benefit for being in silver. It's just kind of you are in a normal state of affairs, and it's where most contractors are going to live. That last category is bronze. Now, if you're in the bronze category, especially if you end up in the bronze category in the last 90 days of your contract, FedEx is going to basically view you as a risk, and you may not be offered the opportunity to renew your contract. So it's really important that if you are trending towards bronze, that you understand the ways that you can improve it, because as you head into those last 90 days, that last 3-month look back period, that can really be the point where your contract is in jeopardy. Now, again, a quick reminder on how metals are calculated as well. So there's 4 kind of key criteria buckets. So 40% of the metals criteria is safety. So that's how safe your operations are, your compliance with FedEx standards, and prevention of accidents and injuries. And that's number one is safety. That should, indicate to you what is most important for the health of your business. You should always keep safety paramount, and that is why it's 40% of that medal. 35% is service, and that's really just how successful you are at pickups and deliveries. So 75% is that safety and service. It's really what you should be focused on anyway. The other two categories are the one that are where there's kind of the extra wrinkles and things to be aware of. So 15% is customer experience, and really that falls into the RIDE program, the Rate Your Delivery Experience, FedEx with the acronym, so RYDE. And it's basically how well you're meeting customer expectations and how often they're rating you. Obviously, the thing to always think about and that causes some complaints here is that, it's rarely the people, you can think about the last time you actually rated one of your own packages when a FedEx driver delivered it. Probably the only time you ever have is if it didn't go well, and then you might be rating it badly. So RIDE has some challenges, and there's ways that I've seen people combat that or try to work around it, but that is one of the parts of the category that are currently a bit of a wrinkle. And the last one is productivity. So the last 10% of medals is productivity. And that's based on how many resources you're using to deliver to your territory compared to what FedEx calculates you should be using. And so there's a lot that goes into that on the efficiency side, and things that there's a couple of different tools. One of them that's new, and I'll talk about in just a second, around how to understand that. Now, if you are buying a business, you're not going to inherit the medal status of that business. Instead, you'll start completely fresh. And then after you have operated for 3 months, you'll be assigned a new medal status. That being said, you do inherit the people and the trucks that led to that previous medal status. So it's really important to understand the reasons a contractor may have been hurting in any specific category, so that if those are issues that are coming with the business because they're related to certain people, that you're ready to correct those issues before they affect your medal status. Now, there's two parts of the medal status too. You're going to have a current medal classification and a projected classification. So the current one is based on your last 3 months of history. And the idea of this is they want to show you where you stand right now, where you're currently classified based on recent history and this quarter, basically. Now, the projected classification is based on a little bit longer period of time. They're looking back 6 to 9 months and averaging it and using it to project where they think you'll be over the next 6 to 9 months. So you could be silver now, but trending gold, or you could be silver trending silver or silver trending bronze. And all of those are useful pieces of information to understand where you stand and where FedEx thinks you're headed. And then based on that, they're also going to give you some focus areas to work on, to target, to potentially improve your business. And really that brings us to what I want to focus on today, which is something new that FedEx launched a couple of weeks ago called the Spotlight Dashboard. Now, again, FedEx loves the acronym. So Spotlight, the first 4 letters are capitalized. So it stands for Service Provider Operational Tech Link. And then Light Dashboard, because those are, that's the way it's going to work in FedEx. If you're new, you always got to learn your acronyms. Now, when we're thinking about medal classification, one of the hardest things to understand and make sure you're doing right to optimize your margins in the business and still hit FedEx standards is finding the right way to consolidate and analyze all of the data that you've got on the operational side, particularly the data that comes directly from FedEx. Now, if you are currently in the Amazon DSP world and you're used to the level of data visualization that Amazon provides and the clarity that they provide on dashboards, we traditionally haven't seen much of that on the FedEx side. A lot of what they give are kind of a breakdown weekly on how much they paid you. And then you get spreadsheets of a bunch of operational data, and you can kind of do with it what you want, but it's not pretty. It's not something that's really easy to go back and analyze. And Spotlight is the beginning of bringing that level of transparency in operational data and contract performance metrics on the FedEx side. And like I said, some of this data was hard to find, or it existed, but you may have had to partner with external vendors to really find a good way to use it. And especially if you were trying to look back at past dates, past months, and trying to find the right way to analyze it, made it really difficult. So, we talk about things that we don't like with FedEx, but this is actually something that this is an incredibly useful tool, and it's a tool that every contractor should be using. And it's something you should be using at least a few times a week to be evaluating your own business and making better decisions. And again, this is the beginning of the dashboard. It's going to continue to be updated over time. Right now, the main criteria that they're focusing on are the service and productivity sections. So there's nothing right now around safety or customer experience, but I'd imagine all of that's going to be coming soon. Other nice quick thing before I get into some more details here is it does at least show you your current metal status, which that alone is at least nice to have. Sometimes you had to go and ask your terminal manager to get an update on that. So at least having that on the dashboard was nice. So for today, I just wanted to give just kind of a few quick examples on how you can use this data to run your business more efficiently and start to kind of help brainstorm on some of those ideas and ways to really bring it to your business and bring value to your business. So one of the first ones to look at is that settlement summary chart that's going to be in the bottom right of the main screen. This is one of actually the most useful things I've seen come from FedEx. There's so much you can pull just from this little chart and the ways that you can dig into the data afterwards. So at a high level, what it's doing is it's breaking down your total revenue for a given period of time. But then it gives you access to how much revenue you're making per package, how much you're making per stop, and then even how much you're making per dispatch. And you can jump in and compare that month over month to get a sense of how you're trending there. And this is where I tell you to live. If you're just starting and just trying to find some information on this dashboard, this is what matters the most, because when it comes to really understanding the efficiency for your business, you want to understand how to optimize these categories. And crucially, what you should do is you can go back and look at the months where you did really well in, let's say, the revenue per dispatch category, and see what else you were doing those months, and see what your drivers were doing, see how they were doing at a per stop, a per package, a per route basis, and compare that across the business for that month. And then train and incentivize your drivers on how to do that again and how to do it moving forward. And the nice thing is it is so easy to look at this information and quickly switch between and compare. It's not an arduous process, and it's just right there for you. Revenue in particular can be something that's really frustrating to calculate and use and break out at this level of detail because of some of the ways that FedEx calculates things like the large package rate in certain categories. So knowing that FedEx has done it for you means that it should be right since it's their formulas. And then it gives you the ability to really tweak your business while focusing on the right things. So that's the first one. And I would encourage you, if you haven't even looked at it, that's where I'd tell you to start, is look at that and try to think about what is the right amount of revenue per dispatch and work towards thresholds and amounts that really make sense for your business. Now, another one I'd tell you to look at if you're looking for your next few areas to dig into is the resource detail tab. This gives you all kinds of useful information on your drivers. So you can see things like how many stops they're averaging, how many packages over the last 12 months, or over any given period of time, how many stops per hour. There's a lot that you can see there, and you see your drivers stack ranked. So you can get a sense of who your best drivers are, and compare that against how you feel about your drivers. Sometimes you may think someone's the best and then see how they compare in certain areas. But, this is something that we've always encouraged people to look at on a, weekly, monthly, quarterly basis, at least, to see their efficiency, how their routes and drivers compared. And this just lets you do it really easily. Another thing this is really nice for is you can look, and maybe there's ways you want to incentivize those drivers for bonuses, or even if it's just something where you're using this data for some kind of driver review and training in the future, it's a lot easier to put this information together when you can see over the last however many months you want to be reviewing for a period of time. You can sit down with the driver and go over what you've seen, and maybe pull out how others, how the total business is trending, how many stops per dispatch the entire business is trending, and show how they're comparing, whether that's a good or a bad comparison, and help your driver really see that information with almost no effort on your part. That's the important thing, is that a lot of this was stuff that you could pull out of the spreadsheets, but it was not easy. It took a lot of time, especially if you're trying to go back and compare over a longer period of time. Now, The last thing that I want you to think about, and this is just for today, like I said, I'm just trying to give a few examples for today, is that this can be incredibly useful for both negotiations and renegotiations. So what you've got is the ability to look at the months where your revenue per dispatch was high or was low, and you can pull out all the other operational data as well to say, look, FedEx, it was costing me X amount per dispatch. This is what you're paying me to dispatch. And if you want me to be able to maintain a margin that'll allow me to continue to operate successfully, this is how much the revenue needs to be increased. And you can say, I'm a silver medal. My efficiency is within the right range you're asking for. The contract needs to be adjusted to get us back into the right ranges where we're all healthy. And really, the important thing here is that you are using their data and their context to make that argument. And that's often been one of the challenges when it comes to having those frank conversations, is that it was really hard for us as contractors to pull out that information and be able to bring it to conversations unless you spent, days, weeks compiling it all. And so this gives you a way to see it in real time, but also pull it for times like this when you need to put our argument together. And at the end of the day, that should really be the main takeaway you have here, is that this dashboard was created by FedEx. So it obviously is going to reflect the way that FedEx thinks about your territory and the way that they look at contractor businesses, the way that they analyze contractor businesses. So you need to be using this information to make better decisions for yourself, and you need to be learning the same way of talking about it and describing your business so that you can speak in a way that FedEx is going to understand and respond to at any kind of conflict or negotiation. This gives you a way to speak in their terms, the way their engineering teams are understanding your territory. In addition to all the other things we talk about around unique characteristics and ways to go into that conversation, this gives you the ammo to talk about the numbers and the ways that FedEx goes about calculating the values of territories and really dig into the numbers as they see it. Again, this is still relatively new. It's only been out a couple of weeks, and this is just a few ideas of ways I've seen contractors go about tackling this and using this information. And I know there are going to be all kinds of creative ways that contractors as entrepreneurs are going to find ways to use this information to continue to be successful. And as this develops, we're going to keep bringing it back to you. But, it's nice when I can come with some good news that FedEx has implemented something that really goes and reinforces a lot of the stuff that we have always asked for and talked about in the space for ways to better understand and improve your businesses. And obviously this isn't perfect. It's not like this is the silver bullet that will save everyone. But this is a way that you can get a little more information and use that information in a way that FedEx will understand to help facilitate those conversations and help you think about your business in a way where you can operate more efficiently and do it in a way that's best for you, not just operating more efficiently to hit the FedEx metrics, but really be thinking about, how much money am I making and how much money was I making in the good times and the bad times, and why did it happen? And let's think about ways to improve it. So that's what I wanted to highlight today. Like I said, it's a new dashboard. I wanted to make sure everybody knew about it first off, because there was an announcement, but it wasn't huge, and FedEx didn't give a lot of detail on how to use it. So that's where we wanted to start for today. So I'm going to go over some upcoming events and listings. And like I said, then I will get to Q&A. So if you have any questions, you can go ahead and start putting them into the button at the bottom. And after I'm done with that, I'll go through all those questions. So first thing is the new listings for the week. So we have 5 new listings this week. So the first one is a FedEx P&D business out of Massachusetts. This is 4 routes at $500,000. 20% margin. It's got a manager, 2 spare trucks, and mostly new vehicles as well, with some assumable debt options and a full-time manager on staff. So even though it's a smaller business, they're still a full-time manager, still doing well, and it's a really low price entry point. So if you're looking in the Massachusetts area, this one's for you. Next one's out of Ohio. So this is 19 routes at $900,000. This one has a manager, 4 spare trucks. There's express coming soon. And so if this is someone who's looking in the Ohio area, this is a larger business, and it's still a relatively low price point as a percentage of revenue. Next one out of Mississippi. This one is 11 routes at $600,000. This one has a manager, also has some assumable truck debt, and it's a higher mileage CSA as well. And there's a full-time manager on staff to help with all of that. And again, it's low as a percentage of revenue, about 50% of revenue. The last P&D one we've got this week is out of Texas. So this is FedEx P&D, 16 routes at 1.2 million. This one has 2 managers, 8 spare trucks, and it's a rural territory and those 2 full-time managers are there to handle all of the daily operations. So with all the spare trucks, the extra managers, if you're looking for something a little bit larger in Texas, this one is for you. The last one is also in Texas, but this one's on the Amazon front. So if you're looking for Amazon, we've got one in Texas that averages between 40 and 60 routes at $860,000. And this is, someone who, if you're not familiar with the space, this is a full service lease fleet program, multiple managers that are in place to run the daily operation. So if you're looking for Amazon, that's one we got out of Texas. And if you have questions on any of these, and you can either go to our webpage, click on those listings in particular, or just reach out to info@routeconsultant.com and we will be there to answer anything you have. Just quickly, also, I wanted to again highlight our upcoming events. So we do have, if you've been or heard about our new investor summits in the past, those are no longer in person. They are digital new investor summits that are on demand. You can sign up for any time. So if you're still trying to decide if FedEx is the right space for you, those are, it's basically a point for, we are trying to teach you everything we can over in a digital course to help you make that decision and to help you decide if P&D or line haul is the right space for you. And once you come out of that summit, it does come with a new investor workshop that's a part of that summit where you will be able to come in person. We usually host those one every other month. And that is a place for you to come meet vendors, meet us, ask questions, and learn a little bit about the future of the space as well. So whether you are attending a new investor summit or haven't attended one yet and are looking to attend, make sure you also sign up for that workshop and come in person as well. 2 other events just to make sure you're aware of. We do have happy hours across the country. We just had a road show this past week in Ohio. So we come to all different parts of the country. I flew back in this morning to make sure I was here for the webinar today. So if you are waiting for us to come to your neck of the woods, you can look at our happy hour schedule. We just put it in the chat. See if we're going to be near you anytime soon. Those are completely free to attend, free food, free drink, and we want to make sure you get to meet other contractors, vendors in your area so you can network there. And then lastly, the one I always want to make sure you know about is we do have our expo coming up this summer, first week of August, and it's going to be in Dallas, Texas. And that is our huge contractor event that we host every year where we have people from across the country all come into one place, really take time to learn, find out about the future of the space, meet every vendor you can think of all in one place, meet every contractor from across the country. And really, it is a party. It's a great time. It's 2 or 3 full days of we have content, we have food, and we'll make sure you drink too. And so that is free to attend as well. But if you are planning on attending, we want to make sure you book that hotel room because that does sell out. So that link to book your hotel room is in the chat as well. Okay, so let me go to the Q&A and we will go, I'll try to get through all of these that are here. So first one is, where can I find Spotlight? So if you haven't seen it, it's in MyGroundBiz account. So you have to go in, log into the actual MyGroundBiz account, and then it's under, I think, other apps or contractor apps, and you can scroll down that little pane and Spotlight will be there, that dashboard. You do have to set up a separate password, set up separate 2-factor authentication. So it is secure and you will need, to set all of that up, but you'll access it for the first time through your MyGroundBiz account. Somebody asked a quick question on the cost of the new investor summit. Let me see. I believe it is $699. It is. Okay. Before I come out here and lie on a live webinar. Yeah, $699 is the cost for the new investor summit, which is that digital course that also includes the workshop in person. Now, here's a question. So how is the Express integration progressing? So it is still rolling out. There's still, lots of places across the country that don't have Express. I'd say most of the country still doesn't have Express. It's And then some, a lot of people still don't even know a timeline of when it's going to roll out. FedEx is kind of doing it in waves, and sometimes you may just find out, the next week that Express is coming. Usually an indication is either that security is increasing, or they'll often be building, a separate new dock that meets the new requirements around TSA packages, since they have to fly. And so often that's an indication, but I'd say for the most part, it depends on your contracted area, how difficult Express is. It depends on how early in the day you have time commits in terms of how difficult it's going to be for you to hit them. And it's a mixed bag. Some people, it doesn't affect them at all. They can hit all of those stops as a part of their normal route. They don't have to build any new express type routes. Some people have to make big changes to hit it. And some people are struggling. Some people are doing really well. So, it kind of runs the gamut depending on the territory and the area, but it is still a work in progress is what I would say. FedEx is still trying to tweak that rollout and roll it out across the country and make sure that there are data and platforms to help contractors, but it's still a work in progress. Broad question here. I will try to answer it quickly. So Daniel asked, is SBA the best loan when acquiring a FedEx route? It could be, is the simplest answer. There are pros and cons to a bunch of different kinds of loans. So quickly on SBA, the best thing about the SBA is that it is a 10-year loan, which means that your payments are less than just about every other option because it's spread out over a longer period of time. The challenges of the SBA are that it's generally a higher bar to actually find out if a business is SBA eligible. Basically, you need, there's certain criteria. So there have to be at least 3 years of history. Sometimes one is enough, and not if you've got a complete tax return, that can be enough. But the closer you are to 3 years, the easier it'll be to get through the SBA. It also needs to be a full business. So if a contractor's selling, half of their existing business, it's a lot harder to get through the SBA. And there's a few reasons like that where, there's some criteria and hoops you have to jump through that can make it where not every business is going to be SBA eligible. So it may not even be an option for you. Other thing on the SBA is that typically, it is a variable rate, which sometimes is good, sometimes it's bad, assuming hopefully that rates go down in the next few years. A variable rate's not an awful thing because it'll go down as the rates decrease. But for those who got rates a couple of years ago, they've increased since then. So it's just a part of the SBA is that rate is going to fluctuate. Another of the nice things about the SBA though is that it is, they're generally more lenient on what kinds of buyers can apply for it since it's backed by the federal government. So although the criteria and the hoops to jump through on the business side are a little higher, the buyer side is much lower, and you typically need less capital to get into an SBA loan, as low as 10%. And so there's things like that to be aware of on the SBA side. It may not even be an option, and when it is, you just have to be aware that the rates are going to be higher. It's going to be a longer period of time. There's other things to think through there. If you're comparing to a conventional loan, conventional loans are much more stringent on you as the buyer. It's more important that your personal financial statement is strong. Also, it's typically only going to be a 5-year loan. Sometimes you can get 7, but regardless, it's going to be, higher payments than what you would see in that 10-year loan on the SBA side. So there's different things to think about. There's going to be scenarios where it's worth considering both. And then sometimes you'll run into situations where you don't even have to use a bank. Maybe there's a combination of assumable truck debt, cash, and seller financing that can close the gap without you needing a bank. So I would say what's more important is understanding how much you can bring to the table, and then understanding the pros and cons of each option to know what tools you have in your tool belt to make the acquisition work, and also know how far you can stretch what's possible. And so multiple things to think about there, but trying to answer that quickly, that's what I would say as far as using an SBA loan. Okay, let me get back to these questions. This is a follow-up on the SBA side. So what is the percentage down for a non-SBA finance route, or is it negotiable depending on the asking price? And so, this may be asking a couple of different things, but I think here's a couple of numbers to think about. So if it is if it's an SBA route, like I said, you can do as low as 10%, but often, even if you're doing 10%, they'll be more comfortable if the seller's also putting in 10%. So it adds up to about 20%. But still, you can go as low as 10% depending on your financial statement on the SBA. Conventional is typically going to be a 20 or 25% down payment. The stronger your financial statement is, the stronger the business is, the more flexible they might be there. If you're not using a bank, if you're just purchasing a business, maybe it's a combination of seller financing, of assumable truck debt and cash, then that down payment is more negotiable. I'd say, though, that the standard that you will see in terms of money put in escrow is 10%. And that's typically after a contract is signed. The standard is that 10% goes into escrow, not before that. After the contract is signed, once there's, there will be money that'll be put in escrow, held there with, very specific escrow language as to when that money is returned. And, let's say you put 10% in escrow and you're going to finance the business through a bank where you're going to have a 10% down payment. You can move that money from escrow to the bank to count as your 10% down payment that's holding the deal in escrow. And then when it's time to fund it with the bank, you can use it as your 10% down payment with the bank. So that's just some rough numbers to think about there. Okay. This is just another quick question follow-up from Daniel. Do we do anything to help evaluate individual deals? And we do. So we have ways where you can partner with us through a longer acquisition process, so we can teach you, guide you, because it may be that you're looking at buying an existing route, and then you do the evaluation, we work with you, and you find out that is absolutely not the route that you want to buy, because you find out it doesn't fit, it's not worth the price that they're asking. And so what we can do is we can do those one-offs. We can do those projects where we will look at a business, tell you what it's worth, help you understand a plan to improve that business. But typically what I find is more useful is being a part of our actual acquisition strategy program, where you do get a few of those analyses, but you also have a consulting partner to walk you through the process. So if that first one falls through, you've still got a consulting partner to help you find the next business, help you go through the interview process, all of the vendor setup. So there's different ways we can help. If you reach out to us at info@routeconsultant.com, we can talk through those different details and what might work for you. A clarifying question on the spotlight. So the settlement summary, when we're talking about dispatch, it is the amount that you make, per route that you dispatch per day. That is what it's doing there. And so you can compare it across months, see how you're trending. And that's basically adding up all of the revenue that route makes and how it's divided out, and so that you can get a real sense of how that's compared. And if you can drill down to what the right revenue per dispatch number is for your business, then that's something that you can compare and use to find the right thresholds you should shoot for, the right operational statistics that led to those thresholds, and really push for those in the future. Let me see. So this is a kind of nuanced question here. I'll answer it as best as I can. So it's a contractor trying to look at contiguous routes that operate at the same terminal, but there's a gap between the two. So contiguous, generally when FedEx builds territories, they want the two territories to touch completely, to have no gaps between them, so that there's no potential territories between them. They want one consolidated territory. And they're saying that there is a small area, but it's a small area between the two territories that makes it where it's not contiguous. Have we ever seen it where they waive that? Usually not. It's possible. What may be your best bet is to see if you can work with the contractor who owns that territory right between that little sliver, and see if you can just get, that zip code, see if there's a way for you to add that to your territory, and maybe it's a trade with that contractor. We saw lots of that back in the days when overlap was happening, but it's possible. But I would say FedEx is really adamant about trying to build those right size territories that are contained in a zip code and are perfectly touching, I'd have to really look at the map to know how, how crazy of a denial FedEx is making there. But generally, that's what I've seen the way they work. So it might end up being that you have to work with another contractor to get that little piece too. So this is a big one. I'm not going to go too far down. I will say, so the question is, what are pros and cons between Amazon and FedEx? So the first thing I'd tell anybody is, if you haven't gone to our free FedEx 101 and free Amazon 101 on our website, that is a really quick course designed to answer those questions. What should I know about the space? What are the good? What are the bad? But just at a high level, a couple of things. We talk about FedEx all the time, so I'll just kind of give you some answers on the Amazon side. So what I would say when it comes to Amazon is, one of the nice, and it's a pro and con in and of itself, is that Amazon is much more involved in the operations and the things that they request of you. So for instance, they do provide significantly more data, but they also decide how many routes that you will dispatch. So there's no DRO where you're determining and trying to find out what the best efficiency is. Instead, Amazon is determining that. So that, there's contractors who do really well on the FedEx side because they found a way to be more operationally efficient. You don't get to make those decisions, but it also eliminates those who, may not have made the right decisions on the operations side. Amazon does it all for you. So they also give you a lot of that dashboards. Ultimately, they're a technology data company, and so they have that they're providing to you, that you will have access to make decisions in your business. There's also more fluctuation day to day, week to week, in terms of the number of routes you dispatch. That's why, in the listing I mentioned earlier, I said it averages 40 to 60 routes. That's never how we would describe a FedEx business. They're much more consistent in the number of dispatches, but Amazon will make tweaks based on what they need of you. So instead of an exact zip code locked area with Amazon, it'll be kind of a looser area. So maybe like North Nashville, something like that, where that can fluctuate in the number of routes that you're dispatching. Amazon also provides the vehicles. It's a lease program where, lease the vehicles, fuel. There's a lot that you get paid for directly by FedEx and don't have to manage. What I will say is, there's good and bad to that truck program. It's hard to get spares if you need it, but the nice thing is that FedEx is providing those, or Amazon's providing those vehicles and paying for them. Ultimately, what I would say, one of the best things about Amazon is, if you are following their metrics and operating well and hitting their tiers of safety and service, they have a tier system where it's like all these companies where they have silly names for the categories. So Fantastic and Fantastic Plus are the top two categories, but if you can be in those categories, you get bonuses. And the ones who are operating those categories are doing really well from a cash flow perspective. And often I see that the cash flow can be better on the Amazon side, but since it's a newer space, oftentimes the equity is a lot better in the FedEx space, just since it's a more proven model over decades, and Amazon's still a little bit newer, which can make financing a little bit easier on the FedEx side, things like that. So I've seen people be really successful by operating both, where they've got lots of cash flow on the Amazon side, which they use to fuel their growth on the FedEx side. Right now, it's easier to scale and grow on FedEx than Amazon, but we'll see how that continues to change and move over time. But this is a whole topic that we can talk about. I can do multiple webinars on it, but what I would say is, take those kind of high level answers, and then those one-on-ones on our page are where I would go next to start building out that knowledge and thinking through what's the best for you. All right. This one came back again, so somebody might have missed it, but Spotlight is on MyGroundBiz account. It is under so you log into MyGroundBiz account. It should be, I think it's other apps or contractor apps. It's some kind of section like that. And you'll see a Spotlight dashboard as a button you can click. You might have to scroll a little bit in that little window, but that's where you find it. There's also in MyGroundBiz, the news side of the site, announcement that should have a direct link to it. So if you can't find it in MyGroundBiz account, I'd go to the recent news where they announced Spotlight a couple of weeks ago and click that link, and it should take you right to it. A question here: what are ways to recycle your fleet with newer trucks? I think that's a big question. So it's something that it depends kind of on how you're thinking about it. So is the different ways. So are you saying, and I'll just answer it in different ways. So if you're saying that, how long should I keep the vehicles, and when I bring them in, where do I source them? When you're thinking about where to source those vehicles, there's companies like AP Finance. There are dealers, Bush Trucking, a bunch of different ones where you can source vehicles from them on the P&D side. There's also you can get a lot of those on the line haul side as well. There's also places like Facebook Marketplace. But if you're talking new, it's typically going to be from a dealer, where you're really trying to bring in those new vehicles. And if you're talking about how do I have the cash flow, or how do I think about the right ways to be able to buy those vehicles, you can always finance them. But if you're financing vehicles, you need to make sure you understand how those payments are going to break out over time, and what that's going to do to affect, your weekly income, and that you're getting enough revenue to justify it. So often when you're selling vehicles, you're wanting to make sure you're recovering enough residual value. And so it really just depends on, if your question is how hard is it, where can I source it, or how often should I do it? People run their fleets very differently. There's some that'll, extend the life as far as they possibly can before they buy new. Some that, every 4 or 5 years on the P&D side, they turn around and sell their vehicles. Even, that might be 150, 200,000 miles. And those vehicles aren't at end of life, but they recover that residual value. They turn around and buy new and bring those vehicles in. A lot of it's also going to depend what your territory looks like. If you're driving really high mileage routes, then you need a more reliable, newer vehicle. So you need to bring those in more often, because if something's 200 miles away from the terminal, when it breaks down, it's a lot harder to fix than if it's 10 miles away from the terminal, if you've got a dense territory that's close. So there's things like that you need to think through when you're trying to decide, how soon or how long can I make these trucks last? And so I think that's kind of a longer answer, that it really depends on what you're trying to dig into. So I see that follow up. So you've got older diesel trucks and trying to decide where to get rid of them. There's a lot of local dealers that you can work with that will do trade-ins. I would kind of ask around. It depends on where you live, where you're located, on which ones you can use. But you may not get tons of money for them, but there are a lot of those dealers that will take those as trade-ins. You can use it to get new vehicles and get some kind of value. There's still the parts no matter what. And get some value towards your next purchase. So those do exist in a lot of local dealers. And if you can develop a relationship, depending on the size of your business, you can get discounts too, if you kind of work with them on an ongoing basis. Okay, so I see your follow-up question here around digging into the settlement summary further. Really, it's something where, I'd want to sit and talk through your specific what you're looking at, and we could go into detail on helping you understand each little criteria, because it's more helpful to see it on a screen and talk about the real examples and numbers than to talk about it loosely here. So if you have further questions on the spotlight, want help thinking about it, running through it in your business, just reach out to us and we'll see how we can help. Okay, I think that is all I have time for today. So everyone, thank you for being here, for joining, for asking questions. This is going to be a developing conversation, but the good news is that for now, I can say that it is trending positively. This is good information. It's information you should be using. And so at minimum, I want everyone to spend some time looking through it, understanding that dashboard, and finding ways to use it in your own business. So that is it for today. If you have any questions, like I've said a few times, you can reach out at info@routeconsultant.com, and we'll make sure your questions get answered, you get put in the right place. For everybody, thank you for being here, and hopefully we will see you all at some of our happy hours where I can actually see you in person instead of just over the webinar screen, or the expo in the summer. And hopefully we will see you all on our webinar next week. It's always going to be at this time every single week. So again, thanks for joining, and everyone have a good rest of the week.